Hello and welcome to this Q&A live on Facebook. I need a moment because Facebook has changed its the way it sets itself up, and I just need a moment to sort myself out. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments and I will answer questions as I go through. Otherwise, I've got some questions that people have said or that I've noted during the week or the month I should say, and I will go through them. So if you could just bear with me for one moment. Hi guys. Well, I'm glad you can hear and see me. That's positive. Thanks for letting me know that, Gail. I can't see myself, and that might feel like an unnecessary thing, but it feels quite disconcerting. I'm just speaking to a wall of admin at the moment. How do I do that? Right, I'm going to go with it. At least I can see your comments. So hello and welcome. This is the Trust Fundraising Hub's monthly live Q&A with me, Beth Upton, one of the hosts of the Trust Fundraising Hub and the founder and CEO of Money Tree Fundraising. So every month I am here for about half an hour answering any of your questions live, and if you come across one of the recordings of these or you come across this recording and you think, gosh, I can't ever make it live, then don't worry. All you have to do is send me a message during the month and I will include your question here on the live, and then you'll be able to watch it back. These videos are all available to watch back, all the historical ones, on our YouTube channel. So just search for Money Tree Fundraising on YouTube and you'll be able to see the historical log of all of them. And they always happen on the third Thursday of every month at 12:15. They probably won't happen in August, and they might not happen in December, so there might only be 10 a year, but that very much is dependent on my schedule. So there you go. Megan has asked tips when applying for core or general running cost grants, and it's interesting, Megan, that kind of thing came up this month already, and I was already going to touch on it. It is, trusts tend to want to give you restricted funds, or at the very least towards something quite specific, rather than just what they would see as some black hole of general costs. There are exceptions, and I would say that the world is moving forward and funders are becoming more enlightened and recognising that if they really buy into an organisation, then they really should just give you guys free rein to use your money, because you are the experts delivering and you know what needs to happen on the ground. It's particularly true post-COVID, where you've all probably spent all your reserves and you probably need to start rebuilding them and that sort of thing. And also, I think COVID really showed us, so those of you who are in organisations who had to respond to COVID in terms of your beneficiaries' needs changing overnight, really shows us that having some decent amounts of unrestricted money allows us to be agile in the face of life and world events, doesn't it? So I would say have the conversations when you have the relationships with the funders, have the conversations as to why unrestricted income is more important. Don't necessarily talk about core and general running costs, but just unrestricted income, so you can allocate it as you need to. I also think that everyone should be allocating a proportion of those centralised costs to all of their projects. So if you've got a project delivering whatever and the direct project costs are 25 grand a year, you should be putting a decent proportion of your central costs, whether it's your chief exec salary, your finance manager's salary, the cost of your office, your gas bill, whatever it is, towards those projects. Because the hard truth is, without your organisation, the project doesn't exist. So the project needs to bear its share of the burden there. And that in my years of trust fundraising, I've definitely seen organisations going from almost all in saying no to almost all saying yes to that stuff. And yeah, I'm afraid there's no sort of easy, like, core and general running costs just aren't very exciting. Please can you help us pay our gas bill isn't very exciting. And I think what you've got to focus on is, what is your end goal? Why do you need the gas bill paying? Why do you need the office rent paying? Is it to stop people being too hungry? Is it to enable young people's education? What is your core charitable purpose, and focus on that. And the fact that you've got to pay the gas bill is a necessary part of that, but really your application needs to focus on beneficiaries and end results. Gail, how do you deal with asking for a grant for something you're not sure is the right thing to spend money on? You don't rush to ask for the grant. So that's really tricky, and that feels like a lot of internal stuff there, Gail. It sounds like, and fundamentally fundraisers, even trust fundraisers, it isn't our job to take on the burden of sorting out organisations and getting them to know their stuff. We are only the trust fundraisers. What happens is we ask lots of those tricksy questions compared to other fundraisers and perhaps compared to anyone else, and that can lead to us being seen as the problem solvers or the problem creators in terms of yes, but why are we doing project A and not project B? What evidence do we have that project A is the right thing to go forward? But I don't think you should be applying for money if you're not sure, because a funder will see through it. Like, funders fund lots of organisations doing the same charitable aims as you. That's kind of what funders are, and they will know. They might not be the experts, but they've got a fairly good knowledge. And if everyone else who's trying to solve your world problem is doing B and you're the only people doing A, you've got to have a good reason for that. And I think that is when you push back internally to your organisation, because it's organisational reputation and personal reputation that you're risking there. And if you get a reputation as an organisation for submitting flimsy applications for badly thought through projects, no one's going to want to fund you. This is all about building up trust. So Claire, someone told me a funder had told them they prefer essential cost to core cost. I think that's really clever, and I think there's two separate things here. There's our vernacular as professionals, and we all know what we mean by general running costs and core costs. But I think that if we put that out in the public domain, it is an us and them thing, isn't it? And what you say, Claire, is really clever. If we change the terminology to essential rather than core, then we ourselves are seeing them as part of the essential thing, as are the rest of the fundraising departments, as are everyone else in the organisation, and and as are funders. I call them centralised costs sometimes, because there seems to be, so you only have one fundraising director, you only have one or fundraising department, or you only have one finance director, you only have one chief exec. So you've got these central costs, and all these projects spin off from it. And without the centre, you wouldn't have the external staff. So I think that's really clever. And I think that as a sector we could do with changing our vernacular as well, because I think all the time that we are talking about core versus project, we are going to end up putting that out there in the public domain. And if we just change it to whatever, centralised, essential, then I think it would help our thinking as well. Do I have any tips for charities with large amounts of reserves? Yes, spend them before you do trust fundraising. Why would anyone give you money? This is the question you need to put back to your organisation when you're having the difficult conversation about reserves. You have to have a justifiable volume of reserves. I worked with an international development charity a few years ago who seemed to have enormous reserves, but what it actually was 6 months winding up costs of their entire operations in Bangladesh. And once I understood that, and I could understand why they needed 6 months of winding up costs because of it being in Bangladesh and politics and blah, 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 then it became a really justifiable number. It felt huge at the time. And I think there's two things. So is it justifiable, like truly justifiable, right? And otherwise, why are you trying to ask for money when you've got spare? Because if you look at it from a funder's point of view, they are getting 10, 20, 30 applications for every one that they can say yes to. They are at the really hard end. Like, they do have hearts, these people. They're having to say no more than they're having to say yes. I would find that very depressing. And they need to find quick and easy ways to say no. They need to be able to weed out ineligible applications without it taking loads and loads of administrative time. They are mainly volunteers, or they want to spend as little as possible of their trust fundraising trust funds on administration. And so they set rules, and we might think they're arbitrary, but all rules are arbitrary, right? And one of those rules will be around reserve levels. And from their point of view, they're like, well, yeah, but why are you asking me for 10 grand when you could just spend that out of your reserves? And your project can happen, and someone else's project can happen, as I can give them the 10 grand they wouldn't otherwise have. Excuse me. So I think you need to you need to push back on reserves as a fundraiser, especially a trust fundraiser, because it just makes the job so much harder and becomes unjustifiable to invest in it. So that's what I would say. I would also say that there's no point taking tons and tons of unrestricted reserves and turning them into designated funds by the trustees. Oh, well, we'd like to designate this towards something else, and so therefore it's not free reserves. Charities see through that. They're like, well, undesignate it from there and spend it on this, because if this is what you say you need, then you should spend it. And that's essentially what they're saying to you. We have just been in that position. I asked why we couldn't designate a large proportion of our reserves to future research rather than keeping unrestricted. This weekend we're designating. Okay, so research is different, Claire, and I think designating for research is brilliant. So that's what I would say, is if it is something that is big and long and in the future, absolutely designate the funds to that, and that makes sense. I was thinking more of an example where it was a youth club project. This is from a few years ago, and someone had tons of unrestricted reserves and they just decided to designate it towards youth services and then do loads of fundraising for adult services. And it was like, well, like, you could just spend it. Whereas something that's longer term and big, like research, it makes sense to do designating funds. So that's what I would say about that. I wasn't very clear, sorry. And I do apologise, I've got a real tickle in my throat and I'm scouting around my office and I don't have anything to drink. So I'm sorry if I do lots of coughing. I'm going to leap into a couple of questions I got asked. Gail, designating towards a capital project. Yeah, that's a good one. Except that capital projects are different funders, so you need to weigh up the pros and cons of that. So there will be different funders available to you as a trust fundraiser for capital than there would be for revenue. And so what you don't want to do is designate to enable you to be freer to do revenue and then find that you're not able to do capital. So it is a sort of a flip and a balance. But yeah, if you say that you then have to kind of be able to justify the capital thing, you can't just say a vague capital thing. You need to it needs to be justifiable and real, I guess, is partly what I'm saying. But capital's interesting. I don't know what you do, and I guess it's too much detail to get into here, but it sort of depends what your organisation is and how many funds you think would be available to you as a capital appeal as opposed to a revenue appeal, whether that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. But anyway, also, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to the thing that came up about capital this month on the hub, because I wanted to make sure that anyone who's thinking of capital appeals gets a chance to kind of think this stuff through. And there were 2 points that came up. One was around if you've had a large grant and say it's designated towards a space, you built a particular room for this grant in terms of capital project, you may or may not have had the room named after the grant funder, and thinking about legacy expectations. So if you've had a room allocated as the XYZ Trust, I really hope there isn't an XYZ Trust, but I now know that there is. How long does it have to be named after them? But also if they only funded it so that it could contain certain activities, and then you evolve your work and over a 3 to 5 year view say that those activities don't happen and something else happens in that room that wouldn't fit with that trust's charitable aims, what do you do? And I would say that it's really important to think about that stuff in advance and to get that all cleared up in a sort of grant agreement from the very beginning. What you don't want as a charity is to be tied into being forced to use a room for a purpose that isn't adequate anymore. That's a waste of money. So you need to make sure that you're not too tied into the use of the space. That's really important. And then in terms of name, it's normal to have a finite naming amount. A finite naming time frame. Sorry, I'm not being very clear today. So that might be a decade. We guarantee that this room will be named for you for a decade, whether we refurbish it or not in that time, or we guarantee it will be named for you until such time as it needs refurbishment, because we reserve the right to resell that naming opportunity to help fund the refurbishment work. That one would make most sense. But also give them, we do not anticipate needing to refurbish this room for a 5 year period, a 10 year period, or whatever. And it's when you're launching a capital appeal, it is useful to have these sorts of conversations in advance. So I would already say that every organisation needs a sort of acceptance and refusal of donations policy. You might call that an ethical fundraising policy. Where will you go to? Where won't you go to? What will you accept? What won't you accept? Why? Who makes those final decisions? That's a policy every charity should have. But then for a capital appeal, sort of adding a layer of naming policy is really helpful. So how much are you going to sell these different opportunities for? And I would say that goes up to the sort of very unlikely event of, what would it take to change the name of your charity? What would it take to change the name of your building? And the example I would give you is an arts example where we had the Royal Court in London, who undertook a capital appeal in the early noughties, I think. It was definitely complete by 2007 when I was researching them, but I don't think long complete then. And they changed their entire name to the Jerwood Royal Court because the Jerwood Foundation gave them such a large grant. So everyone has a price, I guess, is the very flippant way of putting it. But, you know, would you turn down a significant world-changing donation size just because you were wedded to your name? The answer might be yes, because your name might be really important for your patients and your beneficiaries. But, you know, what are those numbers? And let's think about it while it's hypothetical rather than when there's a check on the table when people will make different value judgments, because it's harder to turn down real money than it is to have hypothetical conversations. And the other part of capital that came up, and it hadn't crossed my mind, so I'm really grateful, and I'm afraid I haven't noted down the woman's name who mentioned it on the hub, so apologies for not adequately crediting you, is around escalating costs right now. I mean, materials costs are going up and up and up, and labour costs are going up and up and up, and we have no HGV drivers, and we have a gas crisis, and we have this, that, and the next thing. We have lots of things that are impacting on costs. And her point was that, you know, she can re-budget the cost of her appeal, and they can still go up again next week. And how do you manage that with funders? And I would say that your capital funders have been capital funders for longer than you've been fundraisers, even me, and therefore they've probably seen it before. Like, I've been capital fundraising only since 2007, so what's that, call it 15 years maybe, near as damn it 15 years. And that's the opposite of what I've seen happen. What happened in the financial crash was that raw material costs went down and labour costs went down because there was a labour surplus. But what also happened was fundraising went down. So while our costs went down, so did our income. So we were able to kind of still carry on because they matched each other. We're not in a buoyant, ever increasing fundraising market. The consequences of last year's input to support the coronavirus pandemic have yet to play out. So fundraising is going to flatline, let's say, especially trust fundraising. Let's be positive and say flatline. Whereas if costs are going up and up and up, is it that you need to push back to your organisation to find that money from elsewhere? Is it that you need to have conversations with your trust funders? And the answer to that second one is definitely yes. You need to make sure that they have thought through that material costs are going up. How would they like you to present new budgets? You submitted an application 3 months ago in good faith that this was your project cost. Your project costs have gone up significantly since then. How would they like you to monitor that during their decision-making process? Each one will have a different answer, unfortunately. Some won't have thought about it, so maybe go to some of the bigger ones first. I don't know, you know, Garfield Weston is a good example of a really professional outfit. They might give you an answer for how they want to manage it, and you might be able to say to a smaller funder, if you went to them later and go, well, Garfield Weston have asked this, would it be okay if I replicated that to you? Because you don't want 20 different processes to go through. And I'll just say it's going to be hard, and I don't know the answer to it, but I just wanted to flag anyone doing capital. That's going to be a big issue at the moment. Any other live questions? I've got a couple of other stuff that's come up in questions this month, and I'm happy to go into those. I just want to make sure anyone live is covered off. That seems fine. So, recommend any specific training for a trust fundraiser who is new to trust fundraising, wants the basics and wants to develop their skills and knowledge. So it's really interesting you should say that, Megan. My colleague Deanna and I were talking about this recently. and we were commenting on the lack of a sort of a centralised place any fundraiser can go to get that advice, and it's something we're working on medium to long term to solve that problem for the whole of fundraising, not just for trust fundraising. Everyone has their own favourites, right? That's what I would say is I think Bill Bruty. I mean, we at Money Tree do training, but we tend to do one-to-one coaching, so to sort of learn on the job type stuff alongside junior fundraisers, and that's something this isn't a sales pitch, but I'd be happy to talk to you about that model if that's something that suits you. But if you want a day where you go and you get trained and you come home and you know more stuff, traditional training, Bill Bruty, he taught me how to trust fundraise. He's amazing. I know his program has changed a lot over the years and he's developed it, but I learned a lot about persuasive writing. He did a finance of fundraisers course at that time as well, how to read annual accounts and reports. I definitely personally, and I'm definitely not paid by him, definitely Bill Bruty if you want that sort of traditional thing. If your role is broader and you don't just want trust fundraising but you want an overview of all of it, as annoyed as I might be with them at the moment, I still think the introduction to fundraising from the Institute of Fundraising is a worthwhile thing, because it gives you that sort of broad overview that helps. And it certainly used to be good content when I delivered it about 5 years ago, and I can't imagine it's changed. So that's good. The next thing that comes up, and this comes up a lot actually on the group, is around recruiting. How do you find good people? Where do you look? And all the rest of it. And I wanted to make sure does everyone know about fundraisingjobs.org.uk? So this is a fundraising jobs portal that is just setting out to really make fundraising recruitment more equitable, really. So I know that most of the audience of the Trust Fundraising Hub is from smaller organisations, and I don't know if you're aware that you can post your job on fundraising jobs for 50 quid. In fact, if it's your first job and you haven't posted on there before, you probably can get a code to do it for free when you set up. I think everyone gets their first job posting for free, and then from then on it's a 50 quid flat fee, and that compares very favourably to Charity Job, who are the other big players in the market. Charity Job will offer discounts for multiple bookings, but of course if you're a small charity you might only be looking for one fundraiser a year, you might be looking for one fundraiser every 2 or 3 years, so multiple bookings isn't going to be for you. And Fundraising Jobs is run by an excellent fundraising recruiter who absolutely knows her onions. I've known her for a long time, Polly Simonson of Polly Simonson Recruitment. And again, I'm not being paid by her, certainly not, but I just wanted to make sure everyone knows about it, because it will turn recruiting into something much more affordable. Instead of 200 and odd quid or whatever it might be, 150 quid, even £100 for a charity job. If it's 50 quid a pop, then it's 50 quid a pop, and that's much easier. And obviously they then get circulated on social media as well. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows about that, because I think it's a great new entrant in the market and will really help us all recruit our jobs more widely. Obviously, you are welcome to put your jobs on Trust Fundraising Hub. We don't have a thread. I think it's really important to just have free flow of those things. It's absolutely essential that you have a salary listed on your job. You don't have to have it in the advert, but you have to have it online, available. No find out more, competitive, POA or anything like that. Just list a number or a range. We've also strengthened the rules this month about graduate requirements. If you have to have the requirement for a degree, including as a desirable, that's fine. I'm not going to say don't post the job, but I am going to say you have to justify it. And if you can't justify it, I'm going to take the job off, because there are organisations that are just blindly sort of, if you could hear, that was my dog, by the way. I do apologise, she's very sleepy. There are organisations who are sort of just using old JDs, not really thinking about it, putting kind of, degree or equivalent experience down, and who knows what that means, right? And also it comes as a surprise to you, and it may not. I don't have a degree. I've been a fundraising director. I've been a fundraiser very successfully now for probably 20 years. I think it's 19 years actually this year, and I don't have a degree. Why shouldn't I get a job? And I guess it is personal for me, because I have actually been turned down for interviews over the years because I don't have a degree, even though no one was able to specify what value that had for me. So definitely check out fundraising jobs, equitable fundraising and stuff like that. So there you go. I am out of pre-questions, I think. Oh, research came up again this month. What are the right subscription services when you're doing your prospect research for trusts? And I have to tell you that predominantly we just use for England and Wales, I should say, so not necessarily true for Scotland or Northern Ireland. But if you're in England looking for English registered trusts, and in fact Wales looking for England and Wales registered trusts, then we predominantly use the Charity Commission and just have learned how to do advanced search on that, and that's obviously totally free, and it may be worth your while just sitting down and really wrapping your head around their advanced search function rather than paying for access to something. We do also use grants online. We find that really useful, and there's one other that I can't remember off the top of my head. Grin is the other one we subscribe to as an organisation, and all of our team have access to those. We have gone through the other options that are available and decided they're not right for us. That doesn't mean they're not right for everyone. And there was also a question about invisible grant makers and its value, and we do buy it every few years for our team to have access to. And if you're a pretty mainstream, likely to be funded type charity, like you're in health or children or youth, then once in a while it might be useful, or it might even be useful every year, who knows. But I would say if you're quite niche, if you're a really specific medical condition, for example, or I know that international development doesn't tend to fare well in that either, then probably not is the honest answer. You know, it is just grant makers that have been uncovered or newly created. They tend to be quite small. They tend to be able to donate small sums. You know, there isn't like a multi-billion-pound grant maker out there that is yet to be uncovered that will come out of that. They'll be small and new. So that's what I would say about them. So not bad, but maybe limited in terms of its ROI for anyone. And yeah, subscription services, just grants online and Grin is what we use. We tend not to use the others. Always look at anything with a kind of an air of circumspection. Just because it's free doesn't mean it's valuable. Can you be, what you can only get good value out if there's good data going in is what I would say. So just have a little eye of circumspection if you're going to pay for anything or spend a lot of time looking at something that isn't those ones I've suggested, just in case it's going to take you down the wrong path. What you don't want to do is think that you're getting really good data, using it to build your program, and then finding it's perhaps not great after all because you're not getting any results. That's a waste of everyone's effort. So just a bit of caution there. And yeah, that was it from me. So I'll give everyone a quick moment to ask any final questions before I say goodbye, whilst I also simultaneously obviously look up next month's date because I don't know off the top of my head. So I will be live again on Thursday the 18th of November at 12:15 here on the Trust Fundraising Hub. You have to be a member to be able to access the video, but as long as you answer the membership questions and don't break the rules between joining and the day, you can stay and you can watch it. As I've already said, you can post your questions live, or you can email them or post them on the group in the month running up to it, and we will cover them as best we can on the event. And 18th of November is very likely to be our last one of 2021. I'm just pinning down my diary for the rest of the year, but there's unlikely to be one in December, and so after the 18th of November it would be the third week of January. So do get your questions in, and hopefully I can help, and I hope today has been helpful, and thank you very much. Bye for now.